Hello and welcome to Maximum Foods Inside Track. I've got my Maroon shirt on today just to celebrate the series win. Congratulations to the Maroons. Better luck next time for the Blues, but that's all I'll mention of that. Another interesting fortnight in dairy. Let's have a look at the commodities. General tone of the market at the moment is quite steady. We've seen a drop-off on demand across all the commodities. A lot of pressure on the end consumers globally, with a lot of inflationary pressure across the globe, has probably made buyers a bit more cautious, especially over the last month. At whole milk powder, we saw a decline on the GDT last night. We did not see much activity, buying activity from any of the regions. If any, we saw Southeast Asia were probably the most active. Africa stayed out and China were once again quite quiet. So yeah, the sentiment sort of going forward is that the market may be quiet, especially leading into the higher volume of the new season. Having a look at skim milk powder. So last night, the biggest mover on GDT was skim, down 8%. Probably wasn't as big a surprise. The futures predicted it. Futures market predicted it, and also it's been on such a large trajectory over the last 18 months that it was bound to correct itself at some point. Demand was globally has been pretty quiet. However, this has sort of been offset by relatively low supply of skim in Australia NZ, in the EU and the US. So although we saw that dip last night, there's still not a lot of product around, so pricing is reasonably, or will be reasonably balanced for the next 3 months. Moving across to butterfat. Out of all the commodities at the moment, butterfat probably the most balanced. We saw a bit of a dip in GDT last night. New Zealand and Australian product still remains the best value globally. EU product or EU pricing is quite stable on butter. However, supply is diminished, so things are quite balanced there and pricing quite firm. In the US, we still see okay supply, however, expensive to get the product out. So in the short term, we still see shortages of supply on butterfat, so we should see pricing remain relatively firm in the short term. Having a look at whey powder, general tone of the sweet whey global market is quite weak. Not a lot of activity over the last fortnight. For WPC 80s, yeah, we're probably seeing that stabilise as well. Although there won't be a lot of capacity of production out of the US in the second half of the year, demand is sort of balancing that out. So we're seeing pricing stable to weakening. On WPI, however, though, strong demand still outstrips supply, so we're still seeing some really strong prices in that sector. Finishing off with cheese. So looking in the EU, we've seen demand stabilise there. Holiday season over there, so a lot of the big industrial buyers haven't been active. However, that's been stabilised by a diminishing supply again. So we see pricing relatively flat in the EU. In the US, we see a bit of an inventory build, so that has put some pressure on pricing. So we have seen the CME market come off a bit on cheese in the US. In the Australian, New Zealand region, product in short term is still quite tight. The big question mark for Australia and New Zealand will be how the food service demand and retail demand holds up. As these higher prices hit the shelves or hit your local food service market, it'll be interesting to see how the end consumers take those price rises. So a bit of a question mark over the short to medium term performance of cheese. In summary, we have seen that demand weaken. Supply is still quite diminished globally, so it is balancing things out. It'll be an interesting 2 to 3 months ahead of us. Thanks very much for listening to the Inside Track, and we'll see you again in a fortnight.